Hi, if I found out that Marina Sirtis was my mom, I'd be fine with it. Andrew, and this is Gayties Toys. On today's MIA 80s Ladies, we're going to be talking about Gargoyles, which was a 1994 Disney program, as well as a 1995 Kenner toy line. It is beloved. It is a cult classic. It's fantastic. If you've not watched it, it's on Disney Plus. It's 2 seasons, plus a third if you hate yourself. For this episode, we're only going to be focusing on two characters. There's, in fact, a great many women from Gargoyles that we could talk about, and were not made in the toy line. However, I don't know if they all warrant a video. I might come back and do them, but I mean, we're looking at, Coldfire, who was a sort of reincarnated robot cyborg gargoyle. There's the Weird Sisters, who's, just a toy manufacturer's dream, where it's this exact same three characters except for different color hair. There's Titania. There's definitely options. Hyena, who we'll talk about in a minute. But what I want to focus on more so today are two characters that are very consequential to the part. They're really intrinsic to what happens in the series, how the series progresses, and likewise. I do kind of put on a bit of a business hat in these videos where there's characters that I think should be made, should have some presence on your toy shelf. I'm not here to list every single woman out there in TV land, so this is very much a starting point, but it also might be an end point. We'll see. Gargoyles was one of Disney's more adult programs at the time. This was 1994. We're coming out of DuckTales, Tailspins, Darkwing Duck, a lot of beloved Disney afternoon content, but Gargoyles, it was the most un-Disney-like thing seemingly they had done since Fantasia, frankly. Very dark, very 90s grim dark, in fact, and sort of especially near the end kind of played off of the X-Men of it all, where it's like we're just fighting and then trying to live our best lives. Gargoyles starts off in 994 AD, literal 1,000 years to the day before the Disney program started. It's in Scotland, in a castle wyvern, where a clan of gargoyles had sort of had a bit of a relationship with the humans who lived there, a little bit of a protection racket, if you will. You protect me during the day, we'll protect you at night. The reason for that is gargoyles by day turn into stone, immobile, unaware of what's going on in the world around them. By night, the stone flakes off, they become fully fleshed out creatures. Very, let's say simple, but also very complex clan dynamics with them. However, there was a betrayal between both parties, and most of the clan was destroyed, save for some eggs, a couple of the clansmen, and some human survivors, mostly royalty, of course. The rich always survive. They couldn't be bothered to go on, but their leader Goliath just said, whatever, the local magician, just turn us to stone, let us forget about this whole debacle. And the magician did that, but the thing was, the spell was, so long as the castle was beneath the clouds, the gargoyles would never wake up. Cut to, again, more rich people. A rich guy in 1994 takes the entire castle, builds it on top of his Trump Tower-esque building in downtown Manhattan, thereby making the castle above the clouds, and the gargoyles come back to life. And that main is David Xanatos, and he is schemes within schemes within schemes that I don't think there were any planned for. It actually has a TV buzzword called the Xanatos effects or whatever, but it's just he's just constantly twirling mustaches where well, this plan didn't work, that was actually part of the plan, and it's just 90s as hell. It turns out there was another survivor. It was actually Goliath's mate, who would go on to become known as Demona. She initially comes up and says, oh, it's great to see you, but I've actually been alive for, these 1,000 years, for reasons we'll get into, but she was in fact just a monster. And, fun fact, both she and Xanatos were voiced by the actors who played Riker and Troy from Star Trek The Next Generation, and in fact, a lot of Star Trek alum would voice characters throughout Gargoyles, but especially the Next Generation crew, because they were just wrapping up their show, and they said, hey, let's all just hang out over here. Another important character of note is Elisa Maza, who was I want to say half Nigerian, half Native American character. Just astounding. diversity in one character. She was their one, kind of human ally. She was a police detective, a capturer, but she was one of the good ones, I guess. And she is very much a love interest to Goliath, a very kind of Beauty and the Beast analogy, which they ham up pretty hard. Of course, there was a toy line. It was a very toyetic cartoon. However, Kenner, who was the master toy license, did not agree. They decided to put out toys in 1995, about a year after the show had first aired, but was very popular. They started off very traditionally with, your main cast, your main villains, a lot of toyification, a lot of Kennerization, if you will. This was sort of, the era of 15 different Batman lines going at the same time, and each Batman line had 15 different Batmans per wave. So, I mean, they looked at Gargoyles and said, well, we need to do that. So, as such, as the toy line continued, you saw, just truly baffling decisions. I mean, just Goliath in every color, other Gargoyles in different colors, different armors. They insisted that, just weird vehicles be thrown into the cartoon. They did, on their good side, make Castle Wyvern, which is not, it's not going to win any contests as any of the great playsets, but it's pretty good. Kenner was good at a playset, and it was nice and compact. You can fold it open. If you're looking for the vintage Gargoyle toys, it's a great display piece. Now, on to our ladies. First, we'll start with Fox. She was the leader of, let's say, a TV show called The Pack. They were very much, Kraven the Hunter from Spider-Man mixed with 90s cyborg-y type things. They all named themselves after, like, hunting animals. They all had this TV series, but in fact, they were truly hunters. They did like to go out and, hunt the most delicious sport. In this case, not humans, gargoyles. She also met David Xanatos somewhere off screen. They started a relationship very early in the series, and it eventually did morph into a marriage, and eventually even a son. And the birth of a son really kind of changed Xanatos and Fox's kind of dynamic. They were very antagonistic towards the Gargoyles, very deadly-ish. But once their son was born, they kind of took a little bit of a step back and became more allies. Not to be trusted, but definitely more erring on the side of the good guys. Fox was, on top of being the leader of the pack, she did have another woman on the team, Hyena, voiced by Cree Summer, who is just in every cartoon ever. If you've heard her voice, you know exactly who she is. I'm doing Fox more so than Hyena. If the Kenner Toyland had decided to really go hard on world building, I think both are very great options. But Fox had a few different looks. She, of course, was married to the main villain. Had her own kind of machinations in there, just like an interesting character, a very kind of a complex woman, and I think she would have been a fun figure. The other young woman I want to talk about today is Angela, who is probably more famous and more intrinsic to the plot than Fox would be. Back in 994 AD, once the castle had fallen and once the Gargoyles had fallen asleep, the eggs were actually transported away, and in their travels had made their way to like a mythical island of Avalon. It's a very complex story from season 2. I'm not getting into it, but the Gargoyles did eventually go there and discover that the eggs had hatched. However, time moved very differently there. For the 1,000 years out in the real world, only 20 maybe had actually occurred there. As such, the eggs grew up, and Elisa Mazza, the detective, did realize very quickly that Angela, among them, was familiar, let's say. She said, she very much looks like Goliath, and probably looks like Demona too. This is where we get back to the clan, mechanics. They didn't originally have names. They were sort of given names much later. They didn't really parent within a traditional family circle. It's more the clan was the parents. So two gargoyles might, love each other and make a baby, but the clan raised the children. So it was sort of, not really, it wasn't really in Goliath's wheelhouse to actually sort of acknowledge that this, this child was his. It was meant to be the clan's. However, Angelo did realize that Goliath was her dad, but she was very curious about who her mom was, and Goliath sort of did have to sort of eventually become the dad, because he was the father, and he did have to explain that your mom might be kind of crazy. Back to the toys. I've mentioned Kenner was not terribly interested in, world building. They were kind of almost reluctant to create, Cold Stone, Macbeth, a lot of the villains. Um, they also were sort of on blast by the creator. He has gone on in like over the years, trying to just research the brand. He's tried comic books, he's tried video games, he's tried to get the thing back on TV countless times, and he's very candid with a lot of things. And there's a few Ask Greg websites out there where they said what are your thoughts on the Kenner toy line. He was he sort of wasn't thrilled about having been forced to put stuff in. He also had some frustrations about Angela specifically. She was one character he did name by name that should have been in the line. He also did say that Kenner wasn't thrilled that, Demona was one of the chief antagonists and Elisa was the chief human ally. Two women? What are we going to do? This is surprising coming from Kenner, but this was sort of around the Hasbro buyout. So they were definitely leaning in this direction, but at least they put out Demona, who doesn't look great, and Elisa, who also doesn't look great. Just a weird costume that she's never worn in the cartoon. Pro tip / sidebar: if you do want a good Elisa figure, take the head from the one that they released and grab a Charlie from Biker from Mars. It's the same costume. The final verdict here is actually pretty good, as you can tell. Although Gargoyles was, it was beloved, it was well liked, people, wanted to see figures of it. Like, no one was really kind of expecting that. So in 2021, when NECA started producing, a line with Goliath, of course, as the first character, it was a surprise. It was a real shock, and people were ecstatic. The line did struggle to pump stuff out. This was very, let's say mid-pandemic times, but once they really started going, they really fleshed out the characters. I feel like currently they've kind of slowed down again a bit, but they're still pumping out more. They're still showing off products, so it's hopeful it's going to continue. In regards to Fox and Angela, we do have an Angela figure. She came out much more recently, and she's great, and she's just hits the spot. Fox, not yet, and I do kind of wonder what they're going to do with her. Maybe she'll be with the pack. Maybe she would be with more civilian clothes. I don't know what their plans are for her yet, but it does seem that the NECA team is very excited and animated by the Gargoyles license. So I am hoping it does continue, and I am hoping we get much more of the women from the line. And truly, if they do, I might be more inclined to continue this this franchise, do more videos about Titania, the Weird Sisters, etc. So time and tide will tell. But in the meantime, we do have, at the very least, Angela, who is sort of one of the a later but very important gargoyle to the series. And that's it for now on Gargoyles. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you next time on MIA 80s Ladies.